there is a monumental shift moving through the solar plexus system of humanity right now, and I know many of you can feel it. So many people are opening their minds and their hearts to God. The structures and systems are beginning to break down. And all of this is a part of the labor pains of birthing something new into our field, something new onto Gaia. Many of you know I'm a Gene Keys guide. And in the Gene Keys system, there's this thing called the Great Change that's set to happen in 2027. And I recently went to London, and I know there's a bit of a glare here. I'm actually going to kick over to this presentation here in a second, so bear with me. I went to London to hear Richard Rudd, the founder of the Gene Keys, talk about this shift into this future human, what he calls the trivian race, the Trinity, right? The Homo Sanctus, the new being, the spiritual being. And in this presentation, these are the slides that came directly from London. And I just wanted to do some reflection on the things that we learned there. And I'll get into a bit about the amino acids and the different constellations and the codon rings. Specifically talking about the Ring of Trials, for example, and the Ring of the Whirlwind. And then getting into the sphere of the culture a bit. Talking about contemplation, and then eventually getting into the star pearl, which I'm so excited about. And you can go to genekeys.com, you can get your star pearl profile, you can register for the star pearl itself, and I encourage you to do that. And just one quick note here, I shot this video a few weeks back for the people in my container, the Synarchy. So I've referenced a couple of things and names that I was speaking directly to them. So that's what's happening there. And with that, let's dive into this stuff. And I hope you find it valuable. Let's talk through some of the slides from London, shall we? This one should look very familiar. We've gone through this a bunch. So these are the lines of the core wound all the way on the left-hand side, collectively how that shows up, and then the 7 sacred seals are the involutionary way that we heal those wounds. You can refer to the latest wisdom call or the previous Synarchy call if you want to go over these things more in depth. So letting go of hope and moving into trust. I actually wrote a piece about this on my Instagram yesterday and shared it into the group. I'm just going to read it really quickly. Belief is a roadblock along the path to freedom. Belief gives us an escape hatch when what's required is a burning of the boats. Without full commitment, we're destined to fail because there's no difference between 99% commitment and 1% commitment. Belief is a mental pattern that keeps us caught in a mental net, preventing us from going that last 1%. And that final vestige holds all the gold. Belief fuels our addiction to seeking answers and keeps us dreaming instead of doing. To believe is to limit our understanding because we become stuck in our minds. If we believe something to be true, we aren't certain that it's true. The gap between belief and knowing is a monumental chasm. Belief is of the mind and knowing is of the soul. If we're going to give our lives to something, we can't believe. We must know. And to know, we have to take our own journey, not follow in the footsteps of someone else. Knowing requires experience. You need evidence. Only then can you know the truth. So hope is belief. Trust is truth. And then we have the codon rings and the star constellation. So he didn't go into this, so I don't really have much for you here, other than to say he has started to associate some of the codon rings, which is where it says amino acids. Those codon rings, each one signifies a different amino acid that our body creates or makes. So you can use those terms, amino acid and codon ring, interchangeably. Each one overlays over a constellation.
And he said more is going to be coming out regarding this. He has been clear in saying that even he doesn't fully understand the codon rings. Or if he does, it's not something that he is able to put into words quite yet, maybe is a better way of saying it. But I just found it interesting. The Ring of Trials, this is really important, and I will unpack this in one of the Synarchy calls at some point. But these are 3 gene keys that represent what are called stop codons. So if you look at DNA and you unwind it and go into the translation process, which is how we get directions for everything that our body does, there are capital letters at the beginning of each quote unquote sentence of DNA telling our body what to do. That's called a start codon. And then there is a period at the end of each sentence telling our body that that section of code is completed, and that's a stop codon. And we have 3 different stop codons, and they tie to these 3 gene keys, the 33rd, the 56th, and the 12th, and they show up in that order. So these are 3 trials that we must walk through in order to make our way back into union or unity with the one. That first trial, the 33rd gene key, is the trial of forgetting. So this is all about remembering our soul, remembering God, remembering the other side of the veil, how this game actually works. It's mindfulness. We need that to start to open all of these other things. And that comes as a gift of grace. Then we get to the next trial, which is the 56th gene key, which I actually have in my profile 2 different times, once in my radiance, also in very prominent positions, once in my radiance and once in my core, which is, I guess, 3 times because that's also my vocation, as you guys know. And this 56th gene key is the trial of distraction. So now we remember what's happening, but can we keep ourselves engaged with that memory, or do we distract ourselves? The distractions of the world are devastating to our spiritual development. Everything that pulls us out into our 5 senses on some level is a distraction in some way, shape, or form. So the distraction is chasing pleasure, which pain comes along with that, or it's choosing, or sometimes not choosing, to be stuck in pain. Regardless, anytime we are casting our awareness out and getting attached to the illusion, to the Maya, to the outcomes, to the job, to the money, to the relationship, all of that is distraction. And there are very subtle forms of distraction. Even service can be a very subtle form of distraction. Because you have to ask yourself the question is this service coming from a place of me getting recognition or me needing to feel better about this other person, or is it actual service? And then finally, we get to the 12th gene key. And this is the trial of vanity. And vanity is the final trial. It is the letting go of self into the collective. Letting go of all the power that you picked up along your journey. And I mean power of this plane, but also spiritual power. So the term siddhi, like shadow gift siddhi, is actually a negative term in a lot of the Hindu teachings. And it's because they are these sacred powers that you gain. The siddhi, this stuff is real. Guys, it's real. Not that I've seen it, but I know. To go back to knowing, I just know. And those special powers, think about what that makes you feel like. Think about how hard it would be to let that go. And that is the 12th trial of vanity. We have to give it all back. And then we come into the ring of the whirlwind. which codes for the amino acid histidine. So this is the ring of the great change. I know Himanshu is just looking at 49. I know a few of you have 55 in your profile. So this is reaction, revolution, rebirth. And then 55 is interesting because there's only 2 words. It's victimization, freedom, freedom. So the gift and the city are the same for that 55th gene key. And this whirlwind is what's stirring up inside of our genetics right now, stirring up inside of us, waiting to burst out. Richard talked about this mutation already being present inside of us. It's just waiting for the time that it actually shows up. And so we see reaction and victimization, revolution and freedom, and then ultimately leading to our rebirth, which brings us to true freedom. And it's dizzying working your way through this. A rebirth is dizzying. I know we don't remember coming into this planet for the first time, but you can only imagine how disorienting it was. And then in order to get to that freedom, what we need is the ring of alchemy, which codes for the amino acid glycine. So this is the 6th gene key: conflict, diplomacy, peace. And I don't know all of these offhand. 40 is divine will. 64 is truth. And 47 is transfiguration. And so we've talked about alchemy. Go back to that Synarchy call if you want to learn more about it. But this is what is required to open yourself up to freedom. It's like we were talking about today with the rules and the fact that you're making the rules and nobody or no thing needs to change. What needs to change is your response to those things. And now we come to the line of culture. So these are the 6 lines of culture. So if you look at your gene keys profile, you'll go to your sphere of culture and you'll have either a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 here. Either individual, partnership, unit, which is like 3 to 15 people, network, which is like multiple units connected together, society, which is multiple networks connected together, and then system, which is like kind of a different thing entirely, because a systems level thinking is different than organizational level thinking. But the important part of knowing this is these are the kind of shadow aspects and gift aspects of each of these. So in the great change, the individual either self-destructs or the individual learns to empower each of us. The partnership explodes and dissolves, or we learn to be there for one another and we nourish each other. The unit splits apart, or the unit strengthens you because we each step into our gifts and we each use our individual strengths. The network crashes, or the network supports you. Think about how all of our society is glued together right now in these various networks and pockets of people. What comes to mind is the hurricane that went through in North Carolina and how the Charleston network stepped up to assist the Asheville network. We have an opportunity to come together, or we have an opportunity to go every man and woman for themselves. Line 5, the society crumbles. Or line 6, the society frees you. We have an opportunity through this great change to bring back wisdom, to bring back eldership, to bring back community, support, initiation. And line 6, the system fails, or the system cherishes you. We did not build the system with the individual in mind. because we could not think outside of ourselves. We built the system so that it could sustain itself. And that comes at a huge cost, which is the individuals that make up the system. And then we look at leaders. And this is also tied to the sphere of your culture. So line 1 is a leader as a listener. Line 2 is a leader as a mirror or a reflection for somebody else. The third is a catalyst. It creates energy and movement in others. Fourth is a friend, somebody who's willing to open their heart and really see and be with you. Line 5 is the sage, the wise one, the problem solver. And line 6 is the bodhisattva. If you're not familiar with that term, that is a being who chose to put their ascension on pause so that they can come back and bring everybody else along with them. The Art of Contemplation, as you all know, I do believe. And the Art of Contemplation, typically we talk about pause, pivot, and merge. So we paused, and we've talked about this. I'm just going to touch on it quickly. We pause to make the space. The space allows a pivot to occur, which is just this aha moment where we start to see things differently or something clicks that didn't. And then finally the merge. As we accumulate those pivots, it totally creates this like frame shift mutation in how we see the world. And he's talked about this through the lens of, I want to say it's the 50th or 51st gene key. I might be wrong, though. It might be 58. I don't know. It's in the 50s. There's unease, intuition, and clarity. And so in contemplation, we must learn to trust our intuition because we're going back and forth between a focused awareness, the left side of our brain holding something that we're contemplating. It may be a gene key, maybe something that happened, maybe a feeling that you have. But then we open and we allow our intuition to take us in a certain direction. And that leads to clarity. Which clarity here is divine mind. It is stillness. It is knowing. And then finally, that last trinity of insight, breakthrough, epiphany. So insight is the, this is interesting. Something's important. Breakthrough given to us by grace. Something comes down and that thing that was up here that was like, something's important. It trickles its way down and comes into our heart and into our belly. And then finally, epiphany, which is a lightning bolt of light that just snaps you awake and open. And it's a beautiful experience. I had one last night. Can't make that up either. Okay, this is a very interesting slide, and I could talk about it for a very long time. But basically, there are what are called Yugas, and this is Hindu as well. And probably the one that most people have heard of is the Kali Yuga, which is where we are right now. So we are kind of at the end of the Kali Yuga as we step into the Kalki Yuga. And the Kali Yuga is the undoing of all of the other yugas and all of the other races. So it is a time of intense darkness, intense suffering. That's what we've been going through. If you think about in this century what has happened with the wars, and if you go back to what we did to Native peoples and just everything that's happened, really since Christianity on, even before then, that's all part of the Kali Yuga. if we go one step further back than that, where it says the fall, that was I'm not sure how to say that honestly. Dwapara, maybe Yuga, I can't remember. And that was the Atlantean people, so Atlantis, where we had just a different understanding of things. Like you can't look at the pyramids all over this world and the mathematics that's behind them and tell me we didn't forget something. And that's what the fall represents. It's this great forgetting. And it's that forgetting that pushed us into the Kali Yuga. And that forgetting came about because we messed something up. And God decided it was time to start over. So there's lots of myths of a flood. That's my intuition. But who knows? And when I say the flood, I mean like Noah's flood, like the flood. There's this theory called the Young Adrias impact theory, which is like, I think it's 11,800 or no, 11,200 to 12,800 years ago. If you look at every bit of dirt around this planet, it's clear that something happened. There's this thin layer of dark dirt. More than likely, it was an impact, and more than likely, it led to climate issues, which led to a giant flood over this whole planet, of which there is a good bit of evidence for still. Unfortunately, the dug in archaeology has a hard time admitting that they might be wrong, like science at large, like everyone at large. So that red dot where it says Kalki Avatar and 6 Root Race, that is kind of the where we are right now. So we're right on the edge as we come into the Kalki Yuga. There's a lot more here that I can get into, but I'll leave that be for now. Getting on to the Star Pearl. So this is the full Star Pearl profile. There's 4 spheres that you'll recognize: vocation, culture, brand, pearl. And then we've got our 3 new spheres in creativity, relating, and stability. The vocation, culture, and brand represent evolutionary forces, meaning the work that you do. And then creativity, relating, and stability represent involutionary forces, the divine reaching down to us. And it's balance amongst all 6 of the outer spheres: creativity, brand, relating, culture, stability, vocation, that determines whether your pearl is in the shadow, gift, or city frequencies. So the more balanced we are among all of those other spheres, the more online the pearl becomes. And we've got lots of different pathways here. And bear with me because I don't remember. He did tell us, but I don't remember. It was like really quick in passing what the pathways of structure represent. So these are the pathways on the outside connecting all of these different spheres. Then we've got the pathways of flow, which are in the middle. And pathways of flow are things that are constantly shifting and changing in their connections to one another. And then we've got the pathways of fortune that connect everything back to the pearl. And what you do is you take this assessment, and based on your answers to the assessment, you end up with one of these triangles. So there's 20 different triangles. Actually there's 40. There's 20, which after you take your assessment, the triangle is what are the 3 areas that you were the lowest. And then based on that, you get one of these triangles. And this one's titled Passionate Impact. And each one of the triangles has a different set of things that you work through and contemplate associated with it. And then there's another 20 triangles associated with your 3 highest things. And in that way, it's like, how can I further leverage where things are already feeling really open and loving? And then you retake the assessment and you're given another triangle. So as you work on the other one and you develop and you expand, then you retake the assessment, and now there's a new area with a weakness. And so this one is called Fortune of Our Fathers. And you can also see not only does it take into account the spheres, but the different pathways, all those different pathways that we just saw have different meanings. And so it's going to be really cool to work through these things. I'm so excited for it. Yeah, I just wanted to get this to you guys. It's been on my brain to get it done. And it's much more important that we work through what you're struggling with and what you're going through in your life. So I can always do more of these recordings and save the Synarchy call time for what it's really for.
Like I mentioned at the beginning, this came from my Synarchy call. I do a weekly call with the people that I work with. And if that calls to you, I've got one spot left before I shut it down for a bit. It won't be forever. So if you don't feel a strong call, don't stress. But now's the time if you do. Thank you guys for being here. Till next time.